I would like to do this because I think we're going to be spending a lot of time with the State Department team working on this. I just would like content coordination. So,
Well, I think that's great.
if you're open, that's the first part.
I think everybody, like on our side,
Okay, we're gonna.
is open for the discussion. See how we can make it happen.
So maybe I'll be the one who can push a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks a lot.
We welcome you to support.
All right, so we're going to get going in just 1 second.
Okay, we're going to get started here in about 1 minute. So if you're here to talk about nature-based solutions, we are looking forward to having you join the conversation. So we're starting in 1 minute. Thank you.
Yeah, it should be loaded up.
Ellen to the stage. Ellen? No? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Panelists can just grab a seat anywhere. So if you were looking to come talk about public-private partnerships for nature-based solutions, you're in the right place. If you came for anything else, consult your zone map and find a different pavilion. But thank you for joining us. We know we've already been a lot of content here in COP, and so thanks for making the time to be here. And one warning in advance, we're going to put you to work. We feel like just fundamentally that you hear a lot at COP, but you don't get many chances to talk, to engage, to create. And so I'll tell you what, I'm gonna tip you in advance of where we're going. We're gonna get these folks telling you about a coalition, a global coalition called 1T.org, and how we're all participating in that coalition as one example of a public-private partnership. But as we get into the discussion, we want to hear about your public-private partnerships, because this is just one partnership platform, and we all need to learn from each other in how we do partnerships. You know, partnership is an easy word to say. It's hard to do it well. Coalitions are especially hard to do well. And so we actually really need to learn. There's an art to it. There's a science to it. We really need to learn from each other in what's working and how we're bringing lots of diverse organizations together to get things done for nature-based solutions, to be equitable and inclusive in the way that we build partnerships. And so we really want to dig in with you on details. And so we'll all talk about some of our ideas and experiences and how we've approached some of those things in the context of 1T.org. But then we're going to prompt you on a couple of key topics, such as how are we partnering to deal with the details of forestry and to integrate everything from local knowledge to information coming from satellites, and so that we're getting the best possible forestry on the ground that can deliver everything from climate action and climate justice to nature positive. We want to get into with you in the discussion part and how we talk about finance and make sure that there isn't just money. There's a lot of money moving around here at COP27, but make sure that the money is getting to all the right people and places to get this work done, that we're having equitable and efficient distribution of funding resources. And so we've got some ideas, things that we've tried to do to make that happen, but we really want to hear from you. What sorts of collaborative funding structures have you created, or targeted grant funding have you created to make sure that all the right partners around the table have the capacity to participate in delivering nature-based solutions? And then another really important theme in terms of partnerships this week is youth, right? And so how can we be more and more creative as time goes along in making sure that youth have a powerful role and ways that they can become involved in driving forward this work of nature-based solutions as ecopreneurs, and through educational programs? What are all the different ways that we can have youth in different age groups, on different points in their journey into maybe doing this work as a profession? How do we get really creative about building the best possible pathways into this work for youth and other targeted populations that that might not traditionally have been involved in your community? So we're going to want to hear your best ideas and approaches to doing that, and we'll share a few of ours as well. Does that work for everyone? Is that going to be good use of an hour? Awesome. Okay, so we're going to energize the room with a couple of things. Some announcements and some, I think, really cool examples of very successful work within this partnership called 1T.org. But first I want to kick it over to Nicole Schwab, who is the leader of 1T.org globally with the World Economic Forum.
Thank you, Jed. Hello, everyone. So maybe a few words to start off. What is 1T.org? So it's a Trillion Trees platform that was set up at the World Economic Forum. And for those who don't know, the World Economic Forum is actually the international organization for public-private partnerships. So the idea to set up 1T.org there was because the project is really in service of the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, and to kind of catalyze this global movement to conserve, restore, and grow 1 trillion trees by 2030. And I think the word movement here is the key. I like to say that if I were to plant a tree a second, it would take me 30,000 years to plant 1 trillion trees. If everyone on the planet planted 1 tree a day, it would take us a few months. So this really shows that it's all about partnerships, it's all about collaboration. So we really see ourselves as a platform, as facilitators to serve all the organizations that have been in this space for many years. And so there's 3 important pillars to our work. The first is around private sector engagement. We all know there's a huge gap in funding for nature-based solutions, and this gap is not going to be bridged by public finance and multilateral finance alone. We need the private sector, and therefore we're doing a lot of work to support companies in investing in conserving and restoring forest landscapes. I'm delighted to announce today that since June, we have 12 new companies that have made pledges to 1T.org for 1 billion additional trees. So at the moment, we have almost 7 billion trees that have been pledged by companies. And of course, talk here is all about, from pledge to action. So we're working with them on a monthly basis in terms of the implementation and all the expertise that is needed for implementation, but then also to monitor and report on these pledges on an annual basis. Our second pillar is around innovation, and that's supporting the businesses, the SMEs at the grassroots level all around the world who are driving new forms of companies. These are ecopreneurs. They're building companies that restore nature, and we want to support them. We want to give them more access to finance, visibility. We've run 10 challenges. We have 1,000 submissions of solutions, and we've selected 100 top innovators who in the last 2 years have already raised 150 million additional in finance. So it's kind of, working with the big companies and then supporting a new generation of ecopreneurs. And then third, which is the most important, I guess, is the connection between all of this. It's the coalitions. And so in each region where we're working, we have a partner who is driving the work, who has been leading this work for decades already, and who with 1T.org is creating a community of practice. And that's why I'm so delighted that we're working in the US and North America with American Forests, who's actually almost started before we started at the global level, and who's an excellent example of how that movement can take form on a regional level to drive acceleration and scale in restoring our forests.
Great.
you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And there's just no possible way to describe the leadership of the World Economic Forum in this whole effort, the vision for it, the multiple skills, relationships, and everything else, the financing that World Economic Forum has put into this work. It simply wouldn't have been impossible. And I dare say I can't think of another organization that could have pulled this off. So thank you so much for your leadership and leadership of the World Economic Forum. Okay, so the first thing, so Nicole laid out some really important aspects of 1T.org, including that community of practice, which we'll get into. We kind of talk about how we're learning from each other. But one of the things that we've done in the United States is to really focus on trying to get the greatest diversity of pledges across public sector actors and private sector actors. So I'm going to introduce you in a moment to Evan Notman from USAID, who's going to talk about our first ever federal government pledge. You actually are here at a momentous moment for the US chapter of 1T.org. And USAID is going to share a really exciting pledge that they've made. But that's complemented by pledges from states and local governments and tribal partners as well. And then in terms of the private sector side, we've had tremendous participation by U.S. companies, and we have a couple of those here. We've got John O'Niles from Salesforce and Ellen Jakowski from MasterCard, who've been a couple really of our stalwart anchor partners in launching this entire endeavor, but along with lots and lots of other companies and from really every possible sector, every possible type of company is in this work. And then the other really critical segment of our pledges is nonprofit organizations. And even there, we've tried to be very inclusive. So we literally have everything from traditional environmental nonprofits to the Girl Scouts of the USA, and really have been working very hard to get youth and faith-based organizations in particular to be involved, which I think haven't traditionally always been part of efforts like this. Really proud that we have youth and faith so well represented among the nonprofits. I want to give a particular shout out to our friends at Arbor Day Foundation. Ben Walensky's here from Arbor Day. Arbor Day is doing so well in its 100 million tree pledge that they upped it to 500 million trees this past year. and so they've raised the ambition even higher. Ben gave a look like, I can't believe that. No, that's going to be hard, but I know you're going to do it. And so that was incredibly exciting. And Arbor Day is one of many traditional kind of environmental nonprofit organizations that have really been driving this as well. And so, Evan, I want to let you lead us off and tell everyone about the brand new, you're the first to hear about it, USAID pledge. And then also, I'm going to ask all the panelists after they talk about their pledge, talk about what do you get out of being part of 1T.org? How does it help you implement your pledge and be more successful? And also, what's your hopes for what we as a community can do to inspire and help elevate the nature-based solutions movement around the globe?
Sure. Thanks a lot. No, I'm really excited to be able to talk about the pledge that USAID has made, which is we will, in alignment with our climate strategy and targets, are pledging to work with our partner countries to conserve, increase management and restoration of at least 100 million hectares throughout our global programs. And that's about a size of, I think, about 2 Californias, if I'm correct. So it's.
I looked it up. In Africa is Angola and Tanzania combined, as a matter of fact, or just a little bit less than the total amount of forest in the DRC.
So I think that's quite significant. I want to be completely transparent. This is in alignment with our existing targets. So it's not expecting to increase our strategic targets, but we felt that it's very important and very significant to create this alignment with our targets and the pledge to 1T.org. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, I think we are seeing the opportunity to work with 1T.org, to work with this community of partners to really increase impact. And we want to be able to leverage our pledge to really see how we can work across the globe with partners and build on that work that we're doing. So we're hoping to be able to encourage further participation and identification of how we can increase these pledges and increased participation and working with partners, including the new partners here today in terms of their pledges. I think the way that USAID works in terms of how we're addressing the challenge of increasing the conservation, management, and restoration of 100 million hectares is really through a variety of mechanisms. We work very closely with countries to improve technical capacity, understand how to improve manage measurement that helps both to identify management opportunities as well as to improve the way they're able to report on what they're achieving. We're also very focused on working to find ways to increase investment, working with the private sector, and helping to ensure that countries are also seeing opportunities for themselves to bring in their private sector to achieve these goals. And finally, we're also working to look at kind of new innovative financing, whether it's kind of working within the context of payment for performance solutions, carbon markets, and understanding how to make these work to achieve the goals. So I'm gonna stop now so we can have time to discuss more later, but I'll pass it back to you.
Super. Thank you so much. This is so significant to have the first federal government pledge, and we're in discussions with a number of other departments in the U.S. government, and we feel really confident that we're going to pick up some additional U.S. government pledges as well. And I just want to say, Evan, from my perspective, we're all standing here trying to figure out who's in and how much are they in. And so I think for the U.S. to be able to stand in a very connected and integrated way, and let's be honest, we've had a few years where the United States' commitment here was not clear. And so we're back, and to be able to show how robustly we're back on nature-based solutions and that we are united from the U.S. government level down to local organizations and how we think about them and how we deliver them feels really powerful. I hope that sends a signal that will inspire other countries to think about what they can do, but also how they can work with the United States on things like your fantastic pledge. And so Ellen, actually, it's kind of a perfect setup to come to you because, Evan spoke about partnerships. MasterCard's Priceless Planet. MasterCard's Priceless Planet is a pledge that is substantially, if not even, entirely overseas activities, right? Predominantly anyway. And so a lot of opportunities for the work that you're doing to align with the kind of work that USAID is doing. And so, just love to let you talk about that pledge and how some of these things can weave together.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today for this important discussion about 1 trillion trees. And so when you try to visualize 1 trillion trees, to the point earlier, that's a lot of trees. MasterCard's contribution is through the Priceless Planet Coalition, where we've committed to plant 100 million trees by 2025. And for us to do this, we launched the program in partnership with Conservation International and World Resources Institute. And we chose those partners in particular because we wanted to ensure we were embedding all of our methodology in science, and which I can't say, how important that is, and I'm sure we'll get into that discussion later. But we've really relied on our partners to help structure the program and ensure that we have the highest bar set in terms of the quality of projects that we're supporting. So our first 3 projects were, one was in Kenya, one was in Brazil, and they were spread around the globe. We're now up to 18 total projects on every single continent, aside from Antarctica, where we're going to be working with our partners to plant trees. So who are our partners? We've opened up this coalition to MasterCard's network. So when you think about who is MasterCard, I don't know if anyone has MasterCard in your wallet. Hopefully, yeah, okay. Thank you. But our partners in our network are quite vast. We have over 90 million merchants, 20,000 banking partners, as well as 3 billion card holders. So pretty extensive scope. And in terms of who can be part of this coalition, our merchants can be, our banking partners certainly are welcome.
I'm not sure.
Okay, or we can swap if. All right. Our banking partners, as well as our card holders, are also offer the opportunity to contribute as well. So it's quite broad in terms of who can be a part of this coalition. To date, we have over 100 partners worldwide that are working together with us. And so the principles, again, of this coalition: one, set a very high bar, make sure that it is grounded in science, and we're strategically picking these locations. These 18 locations weren't just, throw a dart on a map. It was to connect it directly to the science and where we can have the biggest impact in terms of carbon sinks and regeneration and restoration of the forests. In addition, thinking holistically about each of these projects, not just about the tree planting and restoration, also about the biodiversity as well as the community opportunities through the projects. And I was on a panel, my first panel at COP this year, with someone from WRI based in Africa, and she was telling a story where she had recently seen a project that had started in a community on the African continent, and the local community was not involved in this project, right? So the team came out, planted some trees, walked away. And her example was the neighborhood, the neighboring cows came over, like the next day and munched on the seedlings, and that was it. They planted the trees were gone within a week. That is not the project that MasterCard is supporting, and I think her point was how critical it is to make sure the local community is involved, that they have something at stake. And to continue on her story, she was saying that had this group involved that local community, they would feel that they have agency and investment in this project. They would have protected those seedlings and ensured that the cows that the community was managing would not have had that impact. So I think it's a really good short visualization of how important it is that the community benefits as well in terms of their livelihoods, their opportunities, and that the projects are built in alignment with what they're trying to achieve as well.
Super. Thank you so much for your work. It's been fantastic. So Jono, Salesforce has played a number of different roles in the launch and leadership of 1T.org. But before we get into your pledge, I just really want to celebrate the fact that Salesforce has put tremendous energy into actually building 1T.org. Right to the CEO of Salesforce, Mark Benioff, who's been personally very, very involved in developing 1T.org and in really representing it and helping us build an identity in the world. So we're really grateful for that. But we want to let you get into the forestry work that you're doing through your pledge, and again, how you're thinking about what you're getting from being part of 1T.org and what your hopes are for our impact.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to hearing from folks out there. The one thing I've discovered about COPs, the best thing is you can actually meet new people and hear a more diverse standpoint and get better ideas. And if you're old like me, this is my 20th COP, you also can put other people in touch. So I'm actually really excited to hear from folks out there. I never thought I would be working for a software company helping launch or grow 1 trillion trees. I was very much a carbon nerd for a long time through this process, and when I first heard about 1T, I was actually quite suspicious. When I first was starting my job, I just felt like sometimes planting trees is a vast oversimplification of the problem. And what I found working with Jad and Nicole and a lot of partners like MasterCard and USAID is there's a real deep commitment to doing it right. And we have been really lucky working through all the 1T workshops and meetings and exchanges with people like Ben and Chris Armitage, who's back there, who's one of the leaders in Africa. And we're really in a listening mode to make sure that when we are lucky enough to put some money into a project that we do it right. So maybe I'll just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what that's been like for the first couple years. We have a 100 million tree pledge. We're about 45 million trees into that. And I'll at least tell you the way I approached it, and then would totally welcome, if you think I should do something different or if you think I've done something wrong, please let me know. But the first thing we did was build a set of criteria. And we went out and just kind of read and talked to all the people that we could. And those criteria you've already heard today, but very much community anchored, not just community anchored, but driven by local communities who are the project inceptors, conceptors, originators, not just being brought in sort of a token, we'll consult with you about the project at a certain point, but really having communities drive the project. We also think that like planting trees is, sometimes that's what we use for shorthand, but we're actually growing trees and we're growing communities with trees. So we have a very strong commitment to making sure that racial inequalities that persist today are being worked on through some of the priority zones where we're working. We also, I think, have a really big commitment to holding ourselves accountable. So for all of our partners, we don't want to over-engineer the reporting. We'd rather that they spend most of the money doing their good work on the ground. But we do ask them to provide polygons of where they're working. And this can look very different. Sometimes it's an urban park, and it's a very specific polygon. And sometimes it's a Gliricidia project in Zambia, which is a very expansive, super pro-poor initiative. That one's got 30 million trees, incredible community benefits, livelihood benefits driven by the community. But it's over a vast area. We work with TNC in Tanzania on assisted natural regeneration, so that's also a really big polygon. But over time, we hope that the public or scientists will kind of hold us accountable. I'm guessing MasterCard also kind of makes their projects known. And we do hope to sort of see some evolution over time of what we can see from space. And then we also ask our partners to really let us know how their community engagement and benefits sharing or job employment, a lot of their DEI practices are coming forward. Why don't I stop there so we can have a little bit more of a back and forth?
Super. Thank you so much, Jono. That's great. And there's a perfect segue. I think for some of you might have arrived a little bit late. I want to set up again the 3 key topics that we want to get into, and we want to get your insights woven together with the insights of our panelists. The first one is about the forestry details of this work. I mean, you've heard all of the panelists talk about this. Is not a target of a number of trees. We're not chasing numbers. We're chasing from all the way from urban forest to large-scale landscape restoration. And so to get that right, we have to get into the ecological detail before we have to make our forestry requirement concern. Then through that nature positive plus net zero and all these other dimensions. And so the question we want to explore here is how are we taking the best practices and the knowledge that we have on how to do that and sharing it most efficiently and making sure that we're driving best practices as far as the field as we can. I was going to call on Martine from Venus Terra, who was here, one of our partners, actually, a perfect example. They've integrated some really fascinating techniques for how to get those survivorship out of reforestation, using special enzymes and how they do the restoration projects. So those are the kinds of things we're interested to hear about, but also once we find something like that that's really working, how do we share it so lots of folks can do it. So with that said, I'm going to see if anyone in the audience wants to kick us off. An example we have work that we're doing where we're taking really best practices for how to do work with anything from traditional ecological knowledge to cutting edge new science and driving that into the work of doing nature-based solutions the right way. And Martina, I was just bragging on some of the work that you're doing. So maybe I call you first to talk about what you're doing. And what are your thoughts about how can other people learn from what you're doing? How can we become more efficient and all getting better?
Thank you, John. My name is Martin. I'm the founder and CEO of Stella. We joined multi.org about a year and a half ago, I believe. We're from Canada, so we started the company. Right now we're working in the Caribbean, South America, also West Africa, and Canada, of course. Mostly we have big investment, private investment right now in Peru. Our focus is really working directly with landholders, bringing capital, technology to increase value of these land as quickly as possible. So trees and forests and agroforests can go more quickly. So they produce goods and services more quickly. And when these contracts have these goods and services are produced, we can share the benefits with the investor and with the landholders equally. And that's where we can ensure sustainability, working for decades with these communities, over time sustainably managing these new forests and agroforests. And of course, technology has a very important role to play. So that's why for us it's a mix of biotechnologies for increasing the value of the land, technology to better manage the scale up and the operation and all the data I generate in the field with communities and working with thousands to tens of thousands of different small landowners, medium size or large size, and also for all the monitoring and the relationship we develop with them. And the social innovation part is very important because the forest sometimes takes a few years before it's starting to generate a lot of value. And these people usually, when they are in degraded landscape, they don't have much to live on. So the first year is very important to support them with incentives to ensure that they can live well, generate revenues, manage sustainably. So when after 5-10 years they start generating so much value that after that they are like middle class and are generated like they can send their kids to the best universities in the country. And then after that it's easier for them to manage sustainably because they saw the positive impact it has on communities. So our focus is really working with our partners, our Net Zero Corporation, Nature Positive Corporation also. They have an objective to secure the supply chain is nature positive, and then working with these communities to create value, and then giving back these nature positive benefits and complementary benefits to all our partners. So we work a lot in the Amazon. Amazon is one of the most important forest ecosystem that we have in the world, and we can create value quickly on these lands. So it's easier to bring private investment and be able to bring returns to our partners. And thank you for all of you that are here that are doing a good job in the field. We need more climate champion and forest smart champions. So thank you, and hopefully we'll be able to partner together in the future. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. And so, great example of how, imagine if each one of those landowners we're working with had to figure these kinds of innovations out on their own, right? There's no way we'd ever get there. So by creating that networks and taking some of your techniques and then efficiently getting them out to lots of people, that's a great example at a certain scale. In terms of sharing ideas like that, Nicole mentioned earlier that within the structure of 1.2.org, we've created something called a community of practice. So we've essentially identified subtopics in getting this work done more effectively. One of which is a reforestation working group. We realize all of us have these kinds of innovations and ideas to share. We have common challenges that we're grappling with. And so the reforestation working group brings all the different partners together. It's almost 100 partners in the U.S. chapter at this point. To hear a presentation, for example, from Martin, and kind of figure out, hey, is that something I can use, and to share those kinds of ideas. So how about others? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for this great panel, and getting the opportunity to share something. I'm Nicotin. I'm leader of urban ecology design and landscape architecture in Delft, in the Netherlands, and I teach landscape architects, urban planners how to deal with nature-based solutions. And one of the projects we did 3 years ago was in the city of Rotterdam, 13 students, and basically how to make the city greener, because each person needs 3 trees to look outside of the window to be healthy. 30% tree coverage. Most cities have 10, 8, 20. So there's a big task also in our cities to reach this goal and maybe help these numbers get to us. So that's what we did in the city of Rotterdam. Also along with IDM, which is a local nature organization, we coalitions with building tiny forests, which are these courtyard-sized tiny forests in schools. So it's all in education we try to get into. So from secondary school, primary school, to university. The year after Rotterdam, we scaled up to national level. We worked with the National Forest Agency, who have forests near cities, and how that they could benefit citizens and city life, but also to make their areas bigger, if it was a forest or a swamp or whatever. Again, to reach these goals more clearly, and now we are scaling up worldwide because students come from all over the place, and some are in Thailand, some are in Morocco, and to see where we can include nature-based solutions and have these trees and greening strategies get in, because most that's interesting. And then you have them most of the time on board because half of the people they agree with us. Let's say they are into what we do, what we all are here for. But the other half, yeah, they have other problems. They don't care about this as much. Who can blame them? Because they are in a different situation. So to get them on board, we say, no, it's green in the city, it's beneficial for your children, for this and this. So that's basically what we're working on now. And what we're now looking for, because we're thinking about partnerships, is how can, for instance in this case, my students help to have 1 year of a project with these kind of projects. They can show what it can be like, they're architect, landscape architects, planners. So let's say, because there was this gap between the finance and the planting actually. So I thought, yeah, how are you open for this kind of things? So thank you for that.
Thanks so much. So that's exciting. So some different partners there, government partners, academic partners. We already got to our third thing, how to get youth involved, right? So that's exciting to hear that the way you've designed that, bringing a lot of knowledge and expertise. You look at that, it's 330-300 rule, right? I think, and so you're bringing some really sophisticated urban forest concepts and weaving them into how a lot of different folks, including youth, are doing this work. And I heard you say you're scaling from local to national to maybe even global. Really exciting. That's just the kind of innovation and creativity that we ought to be. I would vote we spend more of COP working and learning from each other like that. Let's take a topic like how do we partner and just really go drive on it and innovate together, listen to each other, and that. Thanks so much for that example. That was super exciting. So I want to give the panelists one chance to see if any of you want to get into this knowledge sharing. Maybe Evan in particular, if there's anything USAID is doing regarding how it's helping to curate and share knowledge with partners, might be an interesting thing to share.
There. Yes. Sure. No. Thank you for that. And I think, one area in particular where USAID is focused on sharing knowledge and working with partners is USAID in the end is a development agency. So we really are thinking about, as we're working to help achieve goals around ecosystem restoration, forest restoration, we really want to see that done in the context of broader development goals. How are this helping communities? How is it helping economic development? How is it helping food security? And so I think one of the things that USAID brings to the table and has been working broadly with partners is thinking about these opportunities to work across sectors through different goals and say, how are we able to work with a private sector that clearly has a goal of making money, as they should, but understand, where are the ways that we can help connect to the communities and bridge some of those gaps between the economic activities for the company and as well as deliver on some of the development benefits. I think an interesting example, I'll be quick on it, is some of the work that we're doing in Brazil. USAID helped develop and fund the Amazon Biodiversity Fund. And this was done together with the Development Finance Corporation of the United States to help guarantee this fund and bring in, the goal is to bring in $50 million of new funding to work directly on aspects of the bioeconomy, working with partners that'll both achieve new economic goals as well as some of the conservation goals. And so those are the kinds of things where we can find both the opportunity to engage the private sector as well as identify the conservation goals that we want to see.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, it's a perfect transition to talking about the financing side of this. I want to put something out as a principle. I would suggest to you that just nature-based solutions, everybody needs to get paid, right? It's not okay to have frontline organizations, community-based organizations always feel like they're struggling to find the resources to participate. And the agencies and the large NGOs are always very well resourced, and I think we all know that does happen sometimes in our movement. It doesn't happen often. I will tell you in the American context, it's particularly a problem in urban lower-income neighborhoods and community of color in the U.S. But in fixing that issue, making sure that we're actually creating economic opportunities for the frontline organizations and community members in those communities. So we're going to ramp up a lot of investment. In the U.S., we just approved $1.5 billion in our climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, to invest in transportation cities. It's the largest urban forest investment in the world history. But the question is, who's going to get funded for that? And so we announced actually a couple of days ago a smaller investment, $10 million, specifically targeted to find those organizations that might get left behind, community-based organizations, cities that don't even have an single urban forest staff person. How would they apply? How would they even know about this funding opportunity if they don't have an urban forestry staff? And you know what? A lot of cities don't have an urban forestry staff. And so we said, hey, let's create some funding to actually build awareness, build capacity, help folks get some technical assistance so they can set themselves up to then successfully compete for one of these grants and use those dollars. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to get at. How do we get creative about making sure we don't just put a lot of money into nature-based solutions, but do it in a way that we can equitably and efficiently move dollars all throughout the system and make sure everybody has the financial capacity to show up and be their best selves and make their greatest contributions to this work. I think that's just nature-based solutions. So I want to give, if Ellen or John wants to jump in, if maybe something you're involved in that feels to you like a good example of what success looks like in that area, and then we'll get folks in the audience to offer their thoughts.
Sure. Well, just a couple weeks ago, I was up in Scotland. And has anyone visited Scotland? If you've been up there.
Some of us spent a lot of time in Scotland last fall.
Good point. Good point. So if you were there, hopefully you went just north of Glasgow and got to see where Scotland's largest rainforest used to be. Right now, there are only parcels of that land that exist because of the human action that's taken place over hundreds of years. So one of the projects that our Priceless Planet Coalition is committed to is actually restoring and connecting those last remaining few parcels of rainforest in Scotland together to create corridors for the biodiversity that's there. And as we were touring around, looking at the locations where we're going to be planting and restoring the forest and connecting these parcels together, we spent a lot of time talking with the local community members who are leading this work and talking through the process that they have to go through, knocking on doors, trying to identify the right landowners who own these various parcels that need to be connected and the land in between. And they were saying that of all the doors they knock on, kind of the 80-20 rule, about 20% of people, of these landowners, decide to sign up. And this is in Scotland, right? So take this process to some of the other geographies which are much more complex and much less well-resourced, and think about what that process needs to look like to make sure that you get the real buy-in of those local communities to do this type of work. So being on the ground there and kind of experiencing, talking directly to that community and understanding the complexity of the stages of the process, of how long it takes to identify who actually owns the land that is most important to be restored. How do you get the influence within the community to be able to get the permission of the community members to do this, and then all the steps beyond that, including ensuring that the longevity of the project is going to be successful. When we start these types of projects, it's not just about doing it for 6 months or for a year. This has to be withstanding decades of work, right, to be able to last for generations. So anyway, it was just a really important example of understanding the complexity, again, in Scotland, and you start imagining what that's like in other locations.
Maybe I'll jump in on that. I think that's a great example, and we launched a $100 million climate justice and ecosystem restoration fund last COP, and the way that we're thinking about doing it is the very first thing we're going to do is go to all the communities that we are not comfortable going to and just opening up our ears. I think it's just critically almost stupidly obvious that this is a self-selected group here. We're getting a lot more diversity, we're getting a lot more youth, we're getting a lot more people of color into this process, but we have thousands of years of making up for a lot of things we've done wrong. So, yeah, one of the first things we did was we just went to places and just said, what should we be doing, and what should we know, what don't we know already, and we tried to challenge ourselves to find people that we weren't already speaking to. Just a little bit of a plug for an event next Monday, actually. We're working with the local communities and indigenous peoples platform, which is here, which is really trying to elevate traditionally marginalized, very marginalized and disempowered voices. And it's a very cool platform. It's a lot like 1T. It's an exchange program. It's a place where people can work together, build new ideas. So we just said, look, if we're launching this fund, what do we need to know from you? I don't remember what got me on that, but I felt like it was really important to say that like we needed to like actually just go out. Before we talk about financing, you would tend to finance people that are like in your LinkedIn network, and that is not where we want to be. We want to be just going to places that we haven't traditionally gone.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And you know, just an example, there's a young activist from Gambia who I met, and I don't think is with us right now, but he and I were speaking. I've been introduced to him. And he was sharing me the experience. He said, I'm in this environment and I'm hearing about all this money and these resources. I'm working with amazing people on the ground who are doing this work. And he said, I just can't figure out how to make that link, how to even get the conversation started to identify whether there's a possibility there. And so I think it really just highlights you know, the need to build these community connections and conversations, because we have no chance to get it right if we're not even talking to each other and establishing a shared vision from the beginning. And so actually, Evan, you had mentioned something to me about U.S. aid and some of the ways you're thinking about the distribution of resources more broadly across your portfolio, and an emphasis on getting resources to the ground. I just wonder if you want to share something about that.
Yeah, I think, you know, an important aspect of the work of USAID is really engaging with the local communities. And as part of that work, I think one of the exciting promises that the administrator made when we started about the same time we started our work on climate change last year, was a commitment to really begin to direct our climate funding towards local communities. And so that, you know, we now have a goal of trying to get up to 25% of our funding down to local communities, which I think is a really important goal, and not one that will be easy to meet. But I think it's thinking about how we can work together and find the solutions of getting communities involved, engaged, and thinking about opportunities to really get the funding down to the local communities where action can occur. And so I think we would really like to see these kinds of partnerships spurring that kind of activity.
And you know, so one of the things that we're looking for here is best practices. I think there's something really significant in that, to set a target around this goal. Not just that we want to do more acres or get more dollars, but that we have a target around the distribution of those dollars. Because it's worth noting that the Biden-Harris administration has done the same thing with its climate investment more broadly through the Justice 40 initiative, which, in terms of, if you're not familiar with this, if you're not maybe from the United States or don't know, for the domestic climate change dollars, that the Biden-Harris administration has committed to having 40% of these funds go into under-resourced communities. And there's a whole set of kind of covered programs, as they're called, for Justice 40. And so, in fact, that urban forestry funding that I described earlier is one of those programs where there are these hard targets. Actually, I hope for that program it's going to be 100% going to the most under-resourced communities. But there are hard mandates in place that assure accountability in terms of how funds are distributed. And so I just think that's one of those best practices I want to elevate, not just for governments, but for nonprofit organizations, for corporations. Are we really keeping score of how well we're actually doing in equitably distributing resources throughout all the different partners? Okay, so what are your ideas, thoughts, experiences? What's working for you all in terms of the landscape efforts or city scale efforts you're doing in terms of getting equitable distribution of resources to folks? Please.
So I'm Julia, the director of the Natural Climate Solution Alliance. I just wanted to say that earlier today I was in a panel organized by the International Forum for Indigenous Peoples, and they were talking about exactly the same thing. And I think this is, but in the same direction, which is really promising about the importance of, for the value of the voluntary carbon market. In this case was specifically the NCS, but in the voluntary carbon market. But the importance to help indigenous peoples understand it and understand all the steps and be able to make this informed decision. So I think definitely there is a moment where that we need to come together, those who actually invest in the market and that want to make sure that the money goes in the right place. There is those players in the middle that they take the money and then they make the projects. Those are the ones that we actually have to influence. But at the same time, we have to make sure that people on the ground understand who are the good players. So I think our community could really play well together on that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And you're going to have to run a little bit back there, Kevin. You got back of the room.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. I just wanted to share my experience and also get some reflections from the panel. So I'm from an organization called Dark Matter Labs, and we've got this initiative called Trees AI, which was launched last year at COP, where we're building a platform. It speaks a lot to what you were talking about. We're building a platform for basically project developers in an urban context to go online, upload their projects. They can run our impact models, so we use agent-based modeling, cost models, and then there's sort of portfolio management tools for possible investors to invest in. And to develop this platform, we've developed a pilot in Glasgow, and this speaks to sort of like how we bring financing in. So we're working with Nationwide, one of the biggest building societies, Flood Re, the reinsurance provider, the utility company, a community group in the city. And what we're trying to do is make some of those implicit revenue streams that comes from nature-based solutions in cities with the different buyers, so getting them to invest in it. Some of the challenges that we're having with this sort of buyer-led approach is negotiating the trade-offs between them, because their risks of not investing in nature sort of fit differently. So I just think when we talk about investment and the importance of collective action, if we're trying to shift away from sort of philanthropic capital and actually get businesses to integrate it into their operations, I think there are sort of quite big challenges that we're trying to figure out in Glasgow and looking at our next pilot city next year. But yeah, if anyone had any thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. That's really great. And first of all, I just love that you're driving us towards a convergence. I think that's one of the things that's really important here is where we are suddenly talking about the same thing and starting to, kind of identify either common challenges or common innovations that we can start to really lift up. And I think that I will say that, one of those things I feel like we hear a lot here, is that tension between things that we might have done traditionally through programs and now we're monetizing them, now we're doing them through market-based mechanisms, how those things mesh together. That feels like one of those other things. We should have a whole track within COP, right, where we're really working through those details. There's something in the United States called city forest credits. That's a kind of a parallel example to figure out, can we, traditional carbon finance hasn't worked, but if you innovate around it, can we weave it in as a component? And so that would be something perhaps that would be interesting to look at if you aren't familiar with it.
Because of the biomass in cities is so small, carbon's not a big revenue generating potential. So what we're actually thinking of doing with the carbon credits we can get is to give them to the community, because it's all on council-owned land for the maintenance of the trees.
Yeah.
But it's all quite difficult. It's like there isn't even methodologies in the UK to get certification for carbon credits for urban trees. So not a house of cards, a foundation that's being built, but yeah.
Well, in fact, what's interesting about this model is that they are looking at multiple benefits and stacking them together. It's kind of a carbon plus credit is the best way to think about it. So I would love to follow up with you afterwards and share more information. It might be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Exactly the kind of connections hopefully we'll be building here. Anyone else have examples? I know there are so many folks here doing landscape scale or kind of metro scale collaborations, and where, again, how financing is moving equitably through and efficiently through. So all the people who need to be funded to do this work are getting the funding that they need.
Hello everybody, I'm Andrea, founder of 0CO2. We are a company dealing with reforestation with high social impact. We was born in Guatemala, in the north region of Guatemala, and we develop a reforestation project along with local communities. we think that the most important thing when you speak about reforestation is to enable local community to have a direct role, a concrete role in the safeguarding of the plantation. We are now 3 years old. We have been able to plant around 600,000 trees in these 3 years, and we have a success rate of above 95%. That's because we could enable the local communities to have a direct role in the maintenance of the plantation. We also work with local university to bring trainings, education, way to organic agriculture in those farming communities that are really far away from university, because Guatemala is a complex country where university is just for some people and not definitely for farmers. So we really think that if we are speaking about agroecology, agroforestry, we need to speak much more about local communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What's so neat is I laid out 3 topics, and a lot of the examples people have given have actually touched on a number of them together. That really touched on the whole issue of how do we get the right information and tools to people, as well as how do we get the right financing to people. And also some of my prompts about how are we getting youth involved. I really appreciated your example of what you're doing as a way of using the educational system as a pipeline to get youth involved in this work. We are unfortunately at the end of our time, but thank you so much for coming and being willing to engage and make this a real discussion. And the last thing I'll say, you can't get past Kevin. He's a pretty strong guy over there, and if you might be interested in 1T.org, you know, you gotta get past Kevin before you get out of here. And he'd love to be. He's our recruiter over there. So he's got these cards with a QR code, and you kind of hit that, and you'll get more information about 1T.org, and whether it's in the U.S. chapter, if you're a U.S.-based entity, or globally, if you're interested in this coalition. We'd love to have you get more involved. And this is the kind of discussion and learning and innovation that we're trying to do together in 1T.org. So thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.